Is a vegan diet the most minimalist diet, or is it paleo, keto, or something else?
Now, Max, you shared an article recently talking about the vegan junk meat.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I think we have this accidental understanding of veganism that's being propagated throughout our culture that anything vegan is essentially healthy.
Yeah.
There are healthier versions of a vegan diet, and we can talk about whether or not they provide all of the adequate nutrients. But we had our friend Rich Roll on the podcast 4 or 5 times by now. And he's a paragon of health. So there's a healthy way to do this plant-based thing. But just because something is vegan, has it on the package, that's a way that they're promoting a product, doesn't mean that it's inherently healthy, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that the vegan diet is optimal. I think it makes no sense from an evolutionary standpoint. It's not a biologically appropriate diet. And there's really no good data to show that a vegan diet is in any way superior to an omnivorous diet, a diet that includes animal products. So no, I don't think a vegan diet is optimal. You know, there was a study that I just shared, just came out, great paper, published. The first author is at, I believe, University of Adelaide or Adelaide University in Australia. Mm-hmm. And in this paper, there's this misconception, this narrative that when you look at the world's oldest lived populations, which has been coined the blue zones, right, of the world, that they're somehow low protein diets, that they don't eat a lot of animal products, right? First of all, the blue zones have been invented by a journalist named Dan Buttner, and it's this group of 7 or 8 different communities, right? And it's just this like story that's been created, right? Yeah. We can look at the Seventh-day Adventists, right? They're vegetarians. They live a long time, so it must be the fact that they're vegetarians, right? But they also, their religion mandates essentially that they don't drink alcohol. They exercise regularly. They've got very tight-knit social circles. So it's not the vegetarianism that is leading to the health outcomes that we see. And we can pick apart any of these so-called blue zones in the same way. So this paper, this University of Adelaide paper, was like, where does this like story that we're telling ourselves come from? That somehow meat abstention is associated with longevity. What they did was they took 175 countries for which data was available on meat consumption, on GDP, on education levels, and on life expectancy. Okay. Because you could argue that a wealthier country is going to eat more meat. People with higher levels of education, they're going to eat more meat. They controlled for all those variables. And they found that unequivocally that per capita meat consumption was associated with greater longevity. That in countries where more meat is consumed, people live the longest after controlling for GDP, after controlling for education levels.
Interesting.
So, that's a correlational study. There are no randomized controlled trials to show that meat is in any way unhealthy, causes cancer, cardiovascular disease, or anything like that. Yeah. The problem with meat, this is, I know, as a tangent, we've sort of left the topic of the question, but what makes nutrition science so difficult, and yet it makes it so easy to exploit the ignorance of the American people and make bogus nutritional recommendations, is this concept of healthy user bias. When you look at the population level, people who consume more whole grains have better health, right? Because your average American isn't consuming any whole grains. Your average American is consuming refined grains, maximally refined grains, right? Yeah. If you look at the population level and you were to tease out all the people in the United States who eat on a regular basis quinoa, right? This highfalutin grain that most people don't even know how to pronounce. You take all the people who eat quinoa, chances are those people are also taking multivitamins on a regular basis. They're exercising more. They're more health conscious.
There's a lot of other factors.
So that's the healthy user bias. Are they healthy because of the quinoa or in spite of the quinoa? Or maybe the quinoa is having no effect whatsoever, right? With meat, you have the inverse effect, right? At the population level, people who eat more meat are more likely to be sedentary. They're more likely to smoke. They're more likely to eat fast food, right? Yeah. This is true for all kinds of meat, but it's certainly true for processed meat, right? Because what is a processed meat? What is processed meat? It's a hot dog. It's the thin strips of meat that you get on a Subway sandwich, right? Yeah. That you're eating the chips and the large soft drink with. Yeah. So and yet these are the kinds of studies that are used to make nutritional recommendations and are used to write clickbait headlines and are used especially cleverly by the vegan community, right?
Yeah.
So that was a little rant. But,
And this isn't a knock against the vegan community.
no,
or
it's
anything.
not. If you want to be vegan, by all means, go for it.
Right.
But it's the health science claims that they make that are, by and large, for the most part, with few exceptions, erroneous.
I mean, what about the other side of that, though? Someone like Lainey who's asking this question about a vegan diet, maybe she's doing it because for moral reasons.
Yeah.
She's decided to abstain from meat. And the other thing that I hear often, the other side of this argument, I hate that there are sides here, because what you're talking about is you're talking about not choosing a side. It's not carnivore versus vegan.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
You like all of human history are an omnivore.
Yeah.
You look at the Hadza, they're omnivores. You look at the Maasai, they're omnivores. You look at any hunter-gatherer tribe that we have remains of from the past, they are omnivores. Now, it may vary depending on seasonality, on availability of food, but then also we live in a modern society now where we also want to be conscious of the suffering that we're inflicting. And so I think one of the reasons that people are so turned off by meat is the factory farming and the terrible conditions that a lot of animals are in when they are being factory farmed.
Yes. That's true. And factory farms are terrible. And you might choose to opt out entirely. But by opting out of meat consumption entirely, that's not, I would argue, how you change the system. You use your money to vote for producers who care and who are trying to change the system from the inside.
Yeah.
You don't just opt out, because in so doing, you're also compromising, I think, your own health, right? Because I do think that omnivory is more optimal than veganism. But it's also really important to note, and I think we can't. There's this concept of like the ostrich effect, right? Like where like we don't like to hear facts that don't support our pre-existing beliefs. But plant agriculture still costs animal lives to the tune of it's been estimated over 7 billion animal lives lost per year due to plant agriculture alone.
7 billion with a B?
With a B.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny to me that when people who think about factory farming is one thing. Yeah. But then there's also like just the regular, if you've been to a farm before, Ryan and I grew up in the Midwest. We've been to a lot. I have an uncle who owned a farm. And I would spend time there. And the amount of animals that accidentally get killed on a soybean farm or a corn farm is tremendous. Yeah. I mean, there's so many carcasses and so much blood and they're being chopped up by all these machines and even baby deers and things like that are being killed regularly. Now, the intention might not be there, but the death still ends up being there.
Yeah, chemical runoff, entering streams, killing fish, harming birds. Have we somehow just decided that the life of a single cow is worth more than all of these critters that are being decapitated by the tilling of land? So what I try to argue is I think that the one best reason to not eat meat is that you don't like it. That's the most valid reason. Because if you're partaking in any aspect of modern life, if you're shopping in a modern supermarket, if you're buying your greens in the plastic container that's been triple washed, if you're a modern human, you've unfortunately got some quantity of blood on your hands.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Which is it's screwed up, but that's why to me it's like that the ethical argument is not well thought out. You know, if you're avoiding meat because you don't want to be responsible for the deaths of any animals, but you're shopping in a modern supermarket and you're eating ultra-processed plant foods, you're still involved. Unfortunately, you're complicit in the exploitation, the torture, the deaths of animals. It's sad, but it's true. And so I think that so the question then should be, how do we minimize the area under the curve of suffering?
Right.
Did you enjoy this standalone Patreon highlight? If so, you can listen to full episodes of the Minimalist Private Podcast, available exclusively on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.